Kia ora and g'day. So every year on the 25th of April, Kiwis and Aussies from around the world gather at memorials at dawn and remember the brave actions of a unit known as the Anzacs. And in this episode, we are going to give you a brief history into the campaign that made this unit so famous. The year was 1914 and the world was at war. Aotearoa's Prime Minister, William Massey, had pledged Aotearoa's support to Britain with the 8,500 strong New Zealand Expeditionary Force, known as NZEF. In October of 1914, NZEF linked up with the Australian Imperial Force, and together they left for the Western Front. However, in November, the Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of the Central Powers. The decision was then made to use the Aussies and the Kiwis to defend the Suez Canal, and so the force was unloaded in Egypt. By the end of 1914, the Western Front had ground to a stalemate. There were 700 kilometres of trenches that ran from the Swiss border through to the North Sea. The Western Allies were searching for plans where they could use their superior naval support to break the deadlock. The First Lord of the Admiralty, Mr. Winston Churchill, had submitted several plans, including an attack on the Dardanelles Strait that connected the Aegean and the Marmara Seas. Now this plan was to threaten the Ottoman capital of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Early in November of 1914, the British actually bombarded the Ottoman positions defending the strait. But all this did was prompt the Ottomans to improve their defences, including mining the strait. In late November, Churchill submitted a plan for the attack on the Gallipoli Peninsula to the British War Council, led by British Prime Minister Herbert Asquith and Secretary of War Lord Kitchener. However, they initially rejected this plan. Following an attack on the Russians by the Ottomans in the Caucasus, and with Winston Churchill's assurances that the plan wouldn't use a large force or utilise the Black Sea Fleet. Instead, he was opting to use older battleships. The War Council revisited the idea, and on 28th of January 1915, the plan was approved. And so it was. On the 19th of February, the British began their naval attack, and after the first week, the forts protecting the entrance to the strait had fallen. However, defences inside the strait would not fall so easy, and several attempts were made by the British and the French to clear the strait of mines and to destroy coastal defences. And on March 18th, after an attack which saw 3 battleships sunk, the naval attack was halted. However, instead of admitting defeat, the British pushed ahead with their planned land invasion. The plan was put under the command of British Lieutenant General Ian Hamilton. He assembled his force, known as the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, or MEF, out of forces he had available to him out of Egypt and Greece. This included troops from Britain, Ireland, France, India and Newfoundland. But half of the 75,000 soldiers, was formed out of the Australian-New Zealand Army Corps, or the Anzacs. He assembled his troops on the Greek island of Lemos and prepared for the planned invasion. Led by the German Field Marshal Otto Lemar von Sanders, the Ottoman Fifth Army defending the Dardanelles was considered the best in the Ottoman army. His near 84,000 strong troops was divided into 6 well-equipped divisions. The British and the Western Allies underestimated the fighting ability of the Ottomans in the early days of the war. However, this misconception would be destroyed by the incredibly strong resistance offered by the Ottomans at Gallipoli. The Western Allies would soon learn what the Russians already knew: that the Ottomans were an incredibly strong fighting force. Hamilton spent the month leading up to the invasion planning his attack, and at the same time, the Ottomans were building their defences. Hamilton decided to focus his attack on Cape Helles, on the southern tip of the peninsula. The French were tasked with a diversionary attack at Kumkali. The Anzacs, under the command of Lieutenant General Birdwood, would land near Kapatepe, and their mission was to secure key points in the Surrey-Blair Ridge and to capture Maltepe in order to stop Ottoman reinforcements from reaching the force at Cape Helles. Bad weather had delayed the invasion, originally planned for the 23rd of April by 2 days. But on the 25th of April 1915, the soldiers boarded their landing crafts and headed towards their landing zones. Just before dawn, elements of the 1st Australian Division were the first to make landfall. However, due to a navigation error, they were dropped 2 kilometres north of their intended target. So instead of relatively flat open country, they faced a small shore surrounded by steep hills, cliff faces and deep gullies. This area would be later known as Anzac Cove. As the troops attempted to move past the beach, they became lost in the rugged terrain, and only a few managed to make it to their intended targets on gun range. Adding to the Aussies' problems were delays in getting the rest of the 1st Australian Division ashore, who at this point had fallen 4 hours behind schedule. The New Zealand Australian Division landed around 10 AM, and the New Zealand Infantry Division, led by the Auckland and Canterbury battalions, landed around 11 AM and started to join in the fighting. It wouldn't be until 8 PM before the Anzacs were able to clear the positions and begin to dig their trenches. The terrain of the landings proved incredibly difficult for the Anzacs, with sharp scrub-covered steep hills leading to the Surrey-Blair Ranges, with its highest points being Hill 971, Hill Q and Chinook Bear. 3 spurs led off Chinook Bear, with the third having 2 small cresses known as Battleship Hill and Baby 700. The second ran down from Baby 700 and had small indents known as Quinn's, Courtney and Steele's posts respectively. Further along, the ridge opened up to Plateau 400, and to the south, rolling mounds from the landings at Z Beach, later known as Brighton Beach, split into a series of spurs leading towards Kapatepe. The first stretched southward from Baby 700 over a small indent known as the Neck, opening up to the small Russell Top Plateau. Defending this area were 2 infantry companies and an artillery battery. and despite causing massive casualties, they failed in preventing the Aussies from landing and moving inland. That was until the Aussies encountered the Ottomans' 19th Infantry Division, commanded by Mustafa Kemal. One unit, the 57th Infantry Regiment, was on exercise in the area at the time of the invasion. Kemal quickly used them for a counterattack. The Ottoman counterattack pushed the Anzacs off all of their objectives, including Baby 700, the Neck, Hill 971, and even Gun Ridge. It was at this point where Birdwood requested evacuation. However, it was rejected by Hamilton, as he had no way of getting them off the beach anyway. So he told the Anzacs, "You have gotten through the difficult business. Now you have to dig, dig, dig until you are safe." And so, for the next 48 hours, the Anzacs scrambled to secure their tiny foothold. At Cape Helles, the British experienced extreme difficulty too. At the main landing sites of beaches X, W and B, the British suffered heavy casualties. And despite their successes at beaches S and Y, unimaginative commanders failed to take advantage of this. The French that had landed at Kunkali had been withdrawn and redirected to the Cape. And by the 26th of April, the British had cleared the beaches and the rest of the 29th Division had landed. Bernard Freyberg, future commander of 2NZEF and the future Governor General of New Zealand, had at that night distinguished himself by swimming ashore to light flares in order to mislead the Ottoman defenders. Over the next few months, the Western Allies attempted several offences in order to break out of their desperate situation, including an attack on Baby 700, an offensive in which thousands of Anzacs were killed and no ground was gained. The First and Second Battle of Kithia resulted in 6,500 casualties for the Western Allies, with a result of only 500 metres being gained. On the 19th of May, some 40,000 Ottoman troops attacked the Anzac positions. At Russell Top, the Kiwis defended against several frontal attacks, while further south, the Aussies were doing the same. The battlefield had become so clogged with casualties that a day-long truce was called on the 24th of May in order to clear the fields of the dead. Then, after several more attempts over June and July have failed to break out at Cape Helios, resulting at the deaths of 12,000 British and French troops, the command then looked back towards the Anzacs. Hamilton devised a plan where Major General Godley would use the Anzacs, the 13th British Division, the 29th Indian Brigade, and part of the 10th Irish Division to attack Surrey Bear. On the 6th of August, the Aussies launched an attack at Lone Pine. At the same time, the British and French launched an attack at Cape Helios. With the attack at Helios failing, the Aussies had a bit more success, despite losing 2,000 soldiers. Godley started his attack after dark that night with two forces in order to capture Chinook Bear, Hill Q and Hill 971. The Kiwis managed to capture 4 out of their 5 objectives, with the 5th proving more difficult. The Otago Mounted Rifles would lose 100 troops, including their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bullchop. The hill they were trying to capture would eventually be named after him. By the time the hill was taken, the attack had fallen several hours behind and had started to fall apart. The left column, or British and Indian troops, had gotten lost in the rough terrain, and the right had never actually formed. It missed their rendezvous at Rhodesian Spur just below Chunuk. This delay allowed time for the Ottomans to reinforce Chunuk. Across the valley, Birdwood went ahead with his attack on the neck despite having no Kiwi support. The result was 200 dead. Godley then pushed ahead with his attack on Chunuk. The Aucklanders managed to advance until the old Ottoman trench before being pinned down, and when the Wellington Battalion was ordered to attack, their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Malone, refused to, in his words, send his men over to commit suicide. And so, the attack was delayed until that night. On the night of the 8th of August, the Wellington Battalion attacked. However, they found that Chunuk was unoccupied. However, the Ottomans would return to take back their position. And so the Kiwis, now reinforced by the British, held out for 24 hours of repeated frontal attacks. Casualties mounted as cut-off units held on to their positions. They were harassed by MG and indirect fire from the surrounding positions. Incidences of friendly fire made the situation worse, with Malone being killed in such an incident. Several more attacks took place, including at Hill 60 and at Suvla Bay. However, all would fail and result in over 2,000 casualties. The British authorities had become frustrated with the cost of the Gallipoli campaign, and the British Prime Minister in October had replaced Hamilton with Lieutenant General Monro, after Hamilton's request for more troops had been denied. To make matters worse, the Central Powers had occupied Serbia, giving the Ottomans access to German heavy artillery. The strength of the Ottoman force had also increased to 315,000, compared to the MEF's 134,000. So, Monro recommended evacuation. November was marred by the freezing weather and flooding, and so, on the 22nd of February, the British began planning the evacuation of Gallipoli. On the 15th of December, the evacuations began, and over the course of 4 nights, 36,000 troops had been withdrawn. The withdrawal continued until 04:10 on the night of the 20th, when the last soldier left Anzac Cove and Suvla Bay. The British would remain at Helios Bay until the 9th of January 1916, and at that point, the campaign came to a close. Gallipoli was an absolute disaster for the Allies, with 27,000 French, 115,000 British, 8,000 Kiwis, and 28,000 Aussie casualties. The Ottomans had lost an estimated 250,000 for their victory. Winston Churchill, who initially submitted the plan, resigned from government and headed to the front. However, he would return to lead Britain during World War II. For the Ottomans, the battle started a process of national revival for the Turks, and the Ottoman hero Mustafa Kemal, later Kemal Ataturk, became the founding president of the Turkish Republic. In New Zealand and Australia, the battle cemented national identity. And every year at dawn on 25th of April, Kiwis and Aussies from around the world gather at memorials and remember the brave soldiers that fought in that campaign and others. We also recognise the continued commitment of our service personnel, and at every service the ode is given. They grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. And in the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.